I would say that Pat, that it's the hostility predates. The war simply did not help the situation. Too many young men coming back from Iraq calling Arabs Hajis. It's an inevitable byproduct of war. You dehumanize the enemy, otherwise you can't kill him. He can't be just like you, or else it's real hard to do what you do. We got over Abu Ghraib. They didn't. That image stays with them and will be with them and define us for a long time to come. But I think that the notion of the region and the people, as I said, being more violent than we, less humane than we, less respect for human life than we are, less intelligent, more backwards, etc., just fundamentally different people. The wars did not help change that. Instead, what they did was they fueled those caricatures and stereotypes, and they have had a blowback on the community. To the degree to which some of us opposed those wars, we became targets of abuse. You're not supporting your country at war. I hope that had I been Italian, I would have opposed that war because it was based on a lie, and it took the lives needlessly of thousands of Americans and hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, and left the country devastated, with 1/5 of its population today either refugees or internally displaced. So I would say that, you know, the degree to which we see the Middle East as nothing but a seething cauldron of violence and hatred and anger, when the first time some people learn of it is in the context of war, it only fuels the misperception. Look, most Americans had no clue who Arabs were. And then all of a sudden, 19 faces, the guys at 9/11, the terrorists who killed our people, became the defining image of who we were. And so every event of that sort, when it becomes the only way we see them through the prism of war or the prism of terrorism. If Ahmed gets up in the morning in Egypt and goes and delivers 2 babies and comes back and opens his clinic in a poor neighborhood, he's not a story. But if he strapped a bomb on himself, it's all over the pages of the paper. If Iraq's at war, it's our story. If there's a terrorist attack, it's our story. It's the only one we read and know about. And so, yeah, it has had a huge contribution to shaping and distorting and reinforcing the pre-existing distorted notion of who these people are.
Yeah, it is ironic and unfortunate that global developments will often have an effect on U.S. intergroup relationships and also in bias incidents in the United States. I think that starting with 9/11 and then with the combat that followed it, many of us in the civil rights community feared there would be an enormous outbreak of violence against Arab and Muslim individuals in the United States. Fortunately, we have not seen the severity that we had feared, but we have seen issues of perception, of stereotype, and we have seen many incidents that are deplorable, and we need to fight it. I think we've also seen some pushback. We've seen some positive things. We've seen some efforts by law enforcement, by community organizations, by government officials to combat it, and I think that needs to continue. It's analogous in some ways, I think, to the aftermath of the onset of the Second Intifada at about the same time, similar in time to 9/11, which was followed immediately after by outbreaks of bigotry and even some riots in various cities around the world. And on U.S. college campuses, we saw that as turmoil in the Middle East was on the televisions, that there was a significant increase in tensions on college campuses, including some of the violent and otherwise deeply unfortunate incidents involving criticism and attacks on Jewish students and Jewish organizations. And I think that we've seen to this day that if you look at the period of the last dozen years and you chart incidents in the Middle East, and then you chart incidents affecting either Jews or Arabs or Muslims, you will find that when there is negative news coverage on the Middle East, you will frequently find that there are incidents and tensions in this country. That happens, and I think that what that means is that when there are times of tension internationally, we need to be all the more vigilant to make sure that it doesn't translate into bigotry in the United States.
I think the war in Iraq was really made easy by decades of stereotype. We had grown accustomed to that face. And so when it came time to go to war, journalists, certain politicians became cheerleaders. And no one really questioned it. After all Iraqis were clones of Saddam, just like all Iranians were clones of the Ayatollah. You judge a people by their leaders sometimes. I think also the failure of the press, mainstream press, good journalists, had as much to do with that war as the policies of Bush. I want to go back to the very first time we entered Iraq, and they had hearings on the Hill. I think we all remember that. And there was this Kuwaiti girl talking about all the incubators in Kuwait, and the Iraqi soldiers went in and they unplugged all these incubators. Well, you know, I've been to Kuwait several times. I mean, you don't have that many incubators in Kuwait. And I'm saying to myself, who is this person? Well, not one person, not one journalist, not one politician asked the question, is this witness credible? And of course it turned out that she was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador, who had been coached by a PR firm here in Washington to help us enter that particular conflict. And so when you have a press that basically kowtows or bends over backwards to please the administration vis-a-vis embedded journalists, journalists that do I'm sorry, I'm going on and on and on about a profession that I really admire, and I used to teach journalism once upon a time, and it pained me desperately to see how quick we went into that war, how we bought into the myth that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. And so our excursion, or our adventure, our tragedy was made in part, came about in part, because of decades of a dehumanization process.
Well, I don't want to get into the Iraq war, but Saddam did have chemical weapons which he used in 16th of March 1988 to kill 5,000 Iraqi Kurds.
Yes.
So if he had at that time, he had them later on as well. But that, whether this was justification to invade Iraq or not, let's leave it for another discussion. He did use it, he would have used it again or not, but he did use it. But I would like to go to a point made by James in the very end of his remarks about Ahmed with two babies as opposed to those who commit suicide, bombers and all that. I agree with you completely, but I find myself in a very peculiar situation because I don't want to sound patronizing and advising someone on the other side what to do, but I said it before. You're absolutely right. But here is the problem, and James, you know it, here is the problem. There was a movie made about suicide bombers, which was called Paradise Now, which tried to glorify them. And again, that's an interpretation that I add, some will have another interpretation, I understand, and I would really advocate a movie being made about the plight of the Egyptian people or the Syrian people, that might have led to what just happened now, not the Arab-Israeli or Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And the question is whether there are enough Arab film producers or directors that would like to do something like that. So if they can't do it in the Middle East, why won't they do it here in America? I don't understand why Israelis can send all those anti-Israel movies to Hollywood and to get them into the competitions there, and Arabs can't do something that might be critical of their own society. Forget about the politics of it. So I agree with you on this.
30-second answer there.
If I had a nickel for every Arab filmmaker, every Arab author, every Arab artist who tried to get his work shown here in the States, I'd be a rich man. The simple fact is that it is not possible, Josef. That's the problem. We have not been able to break through simply because there is no tolerance for sympathetic treatments of Arabs. I can tell you, Jack can tell you, we've dealt with these characters in Hollywood. And frankly, they shut us out. They don't see a problem. When I said Hollywood has an Arab and Muslim problem, I meant it. They do. It doesn't make money for them because the popular culture reproduces itself. Arab sympathetic character? Get out. Nobody's going to want to see that.
So go to the Israeli movie directors. You know the joke in Israel is there are only 15 left.
I don't need Israelis to humanize the Arab image in America.
30 of them are movie directors. You know,
I have a really good question from the audience. Who is perpetuating these Arab myths in the press and the government? How is it possible that they are so continuously perpetuated? And I was going to ask the same sort of question. I mean, we do have a commander-in-chief in the military who seems to me a major violator of the sensitivities of Arab Americans. He's the President of the United States. He's Barack Obama. How do you rate his role in dealing with this issue?
You know, I think on this issue, I think that there's a tragic circumstance that the president finds himself in. And that is that it was easy for George Bush to say, don't discriminate against these people. Don't treat Arabs and Muslims as if they're the enemy. But Barack Hussein Obama is perceived as the problem by these very people. I mean, we've done a collection of photographs of the signs that have been used at Obama hate rallies that are as gross and distasteful and despicable as any that I've ever seen racist literature and racist slogans anywhere in the world toward any group of people. And I dare say I'd go even one step further. I believe that it is no accident that there has been a resurgence of Islamophobia in America today. And it is because we have Barack Hussein Obama as president. It is an indirect way of getting him. He's not born here. He's not like us. He might be one of them. I mean, pity the poor right-wing nuts right now. They got a choice between voting for the guy they know is a Mormon and the guy they believe is a Muslim. I mean, they're in a real heady bind here. But I think that it is the problem that while it, like I said, while it was easy for George Bush, it's not easy for Barack Obama. He has done things. I think he's tried to contribute to them. I think there are times that he has been gun shy. I'd like him to be a little more forceful, like Bill Clinton was. But I think that he feels that he is identified with the problem. He is perceived as being part of the problem. When after the Cairo speech that he gave 3 years ago now, I was on most of the networks debating people. At the end of one of the debates with George Allen, Macaca in Virginia, I was asked the question by the interviewer, do you think the president can heal the divide? I said, I know he's committed to healing the divide. I think he'd like to try to heal the divide, but I think he has more of a chance of healing the divide over there than he does healing the divide with conservative Republicans here in America. Because the stuff they were saying the day he gave that speech, Liz Cheney and company never gave him an inch. He apologized for America. He equivocated. He found moral equivalence between Israel and the Arabs. He lied about our history. They said the most outrageous things, and with the subtext that he's probably one of them. And so I think that he's in that awkward situation of he'd like to try to do something about it, but I think he's perceived by the very bigots who are creating the problem that he is part of it, and one of them.
Who's Marcus?
I think that's an interesting interpretation. When President Obama was first elected, there was an uptick in internet noise, chatter from extremist right-wing racist organizations. And some of it was about having an African-American president. But a lot of it was about having a president who was assumed to be under the control of the Zionists. Now, that may be in part anti-black racism in the sense that it was assumed that an African-American president is not himself in control of his administration, but it's also a sign that the various forms of bigotry are often intertwined. I'm glad to hear the recognition that George W. Bush was quite aggressive in outreach and in speaking out against post 9/11 discrimination against Arabs and Muslims. I don't think it was quite so easy as Mr. Zogby suggested, nor do I think it was obvious that a president of the United States would have done that. I also think that during the George W. Bush years, there was an emphasis on combating religious discrimination. And there may have been a number of reasons for that, including, of course, the president's faith, but the concern about anti-Muslim discrimination, again, not anti-Arab, but anti-Muslim discrimination was a part of it. And I think one of the things that we've seen with this administration is a shift into other areas, a sense that religious discrimination was covered quite emphatically by the last guys. We have other things we need to deal with, and so I would like to see more done. Now, there is one thing that I think that was positive that's come out of the Obama administration, I guess as recently as 2010, which is that it resolved what was a surprisingly open question as to whether groups like Jews and Sikhs should receive any civil rights protection in university by the U.S. Department of Education. Because for many years, if an Arab student came in and said, I face discrimination, the answer would be pull up a chair. That sounds like national origin discrimination. But if a Jew came in and said, I face anti-Semitism, the answer would be, well, maybe you can go hire a lawyer, but that sounds like religious discrimination, and we don't handle that. Now, okay, so let me just say that I think President Obama should be credited with having done something positive on that.
Yeah, thank you. I feel that Colin Powell was the only one who made a statement addressing this, and he said it eloquently about nothing wrong with an American child born today who happens to be a Muslim or an Arab who wanted to grow up and become president of the United States. That was his dream, and that's what he thought should happen. Now, he did that after he was out of office. Given the fact that 62% of Americans have never met a Muslim, and all this Islamophobia, I think it's very difficult for President Obama to say, what if I were a Muslim? So what? It shouldn't make any difference. I'm an American, and our country has room. Muslims, Jews, Christians, Buddhists, whatever religion should not play a role. Now, if he's reelected, you can bet the kitchen sink and mortgage the house that someone's going to be on him to make that statement, because it needs to be said. It needs to come from the top, to come on down. It hasn't yet, for obvious reasons, because as Jim so eloquently pointed out, many people think he's already a Muslim and not a citizen, and he can't say that now. But I'm hopeful that in time he will make that statement. It's the right statement to make, and he needs to make it. You know, unfortunately, no one. You know, it was interesting with John McCain. Remember that incident when people said he's an Arab, and then McCain said, "No, he's not. He's a good, decent man." Yeah. Well, what if someone had said he's a Jew or he's a black, and McCain said, "Oh no, he's a good, decent man"? That's the argument right there, that a man like John McCain can get away with saying that, and the story gets basically buried in mainstream press.
I really want to be more optimistic. So Barack Hussein Obama was elected. Can you visualize Solomon Cohen being elected as American president?
Yes.
You can?
Yes, I can.
And you ask American people how many will tell you that they can't. So let's be honest about that. I mean, again, I know that I try to make comparisons, but the fact of the matter is that we can look at it from a very positive perspective. There is Barak, which, by the way, in Hebrew and Arabic were at the same time. Interesting. Hussein Obama was elected, and I kind of skeptical if there will be a president in my lifetime called Solomon Cohen. But, you know, what do you think, Ralph? There will be one? Don't run against me.
Yeah, lunch. I'll wager you lunch during your lunch.
All right, we'll meet in our forum.
We'll meet at Peter's restaurant in Columbia, South Carolina.
The best one is Middle East Kitchen. That's the best one.
I'd like to ask.
But I want to just very quickly to say that, you know, the Cairo speech, and that's a good example, without getting into details, as you know, James, the Cairo speech aroused so many reactions that are very interesting on many levels. But what I find so interesting about all that is that as much, I mean, put aside conservative Republicans now, but I go back to Israelis. About 50% of Israeli people saw it was a very positive speech. 50% thought it was a very negative. The point I'm trying to make here is this is the level of sensitivity that we have about this conflict. That somehow we expect the other one to be either is 100% on our side or is 100% against us. And that's part of the problem that characterizes, by the way, minorities. Because of their sense of insecurity, they need to feel that others relate to them in absolute terms. And you know what, James? In America, Arabs and Jews are minorities. So it's another reason why we are on the same boat.
I would like to ask each debater to very briefly sum up with a little closing statement. Go ahead.
I want to thank Ralph again for raising this issue. I hope we shed some light on it, but I don't believe we've resolved it. I think it's clear to me that the two phenomena are tied in history, going back hundreds of years, and tied in animus. And yet, as deplorable as they are, one remains acceptable not just in polite company, but in elite company. And I don't understand, Ken, why it is not easy to condemn Herman Cain and Newt Gingrich, or why it's not easy to condemn those who write and have a prestigious audience to write for and to, and advisors of candidates for office, etc. Those who write bigotry about Islam and about Arabs. It's a no-brainer to me. If somebody wrote the kinds of things that are written about Arabs and Muslims, about Jews, they wouldn't have a place in the public forum, should not have a place. They'd be marginalized quacks or angry students carrying banners. And I deplore that as much as I do from the elites. But the fact is that we have these people on television, regular commentators, people running for high office, people who are today sitting in the U.S. Congress, and they get away with it. And okay, it's not your turf, but when I cite it, you say, I'm not going to mention the names. I'm not going to get into the names. But if the same person were doing the same thing about another group of people, you'd mention the names and be able to say the names. When Steve Emerson can spread poison and create hate, and create a situation where hate crimes occur because he calls me a Hezbollah champion, that resulted in hate threats to my office and death threats against me. Not to speak of the craziness of a Lebanese Maronite, Christian boy, goes to Catholic church, being a Hezbollah guy. I don't know what he's talking about. But what was his effort to discredit me because Eric Holder had invited me to give the closing remarks at the 45th anniversary of the signing of the Civil Rights Bill. And so his way of getting me was to write an article, Holder's Hezbollah Buddy. That's bigotry. It's incitement to violence. It's hatred. And yet people cannot condemn him for it. And I don't find it justifiable. And so yes, Ralph, I agree with the thesis. They are the same phenomena. They ought to be seen as the same phenomena. And until we can treat one with the same rebuke that we treat the other, we're not going to get rid of it. One's going to be, oh, that's terrible, shouldn't happen ever, that's wrong. And the other is, well, I don't want to get into personalities and so on and so forth. That is not the way to do it.
At the Louis D. Brandeis Center, we often work with activists and lawyers who are in the trenches trying to combat anti-Semitism on college campuses, who say to me, why is it that there are double standards when it comes to anti-Semitism? Why is it that when there are awful situations going on campus, administrators will say nothing? And if they say anything, what they say is, well, it was First Amendment protected speech. And they'll say that even if there were things that had nothing to do with speech involved, even if there was vandalism, even if there were threats, even if there was pushing, shoving, rock throwing, what have you, there's always an excuse. And oftentimes, the same administrators will speak out very firmly with respect to other forms of discrimination. So the question asked to me is, why are there these double standards, whereas discrimination against Jews is not taken seriously? And I find that a tough question because on the one hand I say, listen, if you can find incidents where similar actions against other groups were treated differently, then let's bring that to their attention. And sometimes we do. Sometimes we can find situations where anti-Jewish discrimination was treated less seriously. And that's an issue. But the bigger issue, as far as I'm concerned, is not the difference in the university response, but the fact that the university should respond effectively in all cases. And that's true not just of universities, but of public officials, of people in the media, so on and so forth. I find it, if anything, a little refreshing that there are some people who think that the double standard goes the other way. And perhaps it can bring context, and perhaps what it should tell us is oftentimes people who advocate on behalf of particular groups are more sensitive to the discrimination facing their groups and should be more sensitive instead to all sorts of discrimination and all sorts of bigotry. Mr. Zogby asked me the question, why is it not easy to condemn individuals? And my answer is, it is easy to condemn individuals. It is all too easy to condemn individuals, and we see it and we hear it all the time. And in fact, the same individuals who were just mentioned are condemned repeatedly, sometimes, in some cases justly, and in other cases, some of these I think unjustly, but I think it shouldn't be about individuals. There are certainly public figures who have said terrible things against Jewish people, but who continue to get numerous invitations of various kinds to speak on television and elsewhere. No, I'm not going to name them either, because to me, the issue isn't so much is this person or that person doing the appropriate thing. The issue is more, why can't we fight against all of these sorts of bigotries, and why is it that in order to support one group, we have to try to push the other one down, when it should be that in supporting equal opportunity, we try to pull each other up and not push one another down. So what I would say is that the key for all of us is not so much to engage in these comparisons, but rather to say we need to be against all of it.
I think there has been a sincere attempt here today to pull each other up. I think if we differ in just one area, and that is the current boogeyman is the Arab. He has been for decades now, and because he is the boogeyman, innocent people have suffered. They've lost jobs, they've been deported, they've been harassed, they've been kept out of the public mainstream. And I think each and every one of us, in spite of how many of us are each and every group, sure, we all suffer from some sort of discrimination. That's a given fact. But we have to target the boogeyman or the boogie person of the day, because if we don't, more people are going to be impacted from these demonizing images. And thanks to Ralph, and thanks to C-SPAN, I think we've taken a very important step in helping to resolve the problem. We presented it, I think, extremely well. We may have different perspectives of how it should be resolved, but I think, and I'll conclude, we should always bear in mind, when addressing this issue, if you allow me just to read 2 sentences, that the people of the book, as you know, Jews, Christians, Muslims, are all children of Abraham. And centered on the 3 faiths is what? Peace, which is reflected in the similarity of their greetings. Shalom Aleichem in Hebrew, Pax Vobiscum in Latin, and Salam Aleichem in Arabic. Peace be with you. And I think if we can take from this discussion, from being together, and what we do outside this room, and when we go back to our respective places of work, if we keep in mind peace, I think we'll react to these images accordingly.
As I told you, I'm a member of the Abraham family because of this Abrahamic connection. See? Now I know why. We need to mention names, and again, I don't want to victimize myself as a minority but Jews, but when Louis Farrakhan, the leader of the Nation of Islam, calls my religion gutter religion, did the American Arab Institute condemn him for that, James?
Actually, we did.
Great. I have to hear that.
Next
Great.
point.
I hope to hear it. Yeah. No, I hope to hear that. Exactly. I don't know if Pink Code or Jewish Voices for Peace did it, but that's another story. All right, don't worry about it. I was just trying to kiss you. But look, we need to do something about every expression of bigotry, and right now we have a lot of them that are directed at Arabs, but not only. There is this Democratic candidate in New York who is going around the streets now, I think it's Quiz, and talking about Jews and all that. There was a movie made about 9/11 when people in the streets of New York said, of course the Jews were responsible, and even Giuliani was Jewish agent because his name is Giuliani. It was made by a guy called Mark Levin. It was made by a guy called Mark Levin, and not the radio talk show host, another Mark Levin, so that you know. I really believe that this was a great opportunity to show that even though we may have disagreements, there is much more in agreement than not. And Ralph Nader, of course, is to be credited. And where is Russell? Russell, you're here. Russell Muhaibar, and all the rest of them. And that shows that where there are two Jews and two Arabs, you don't need to fight each other. Let them do it, you know, when they have to. That's very bad as well. We can still agree on many things, and I still renew my proposal to you. When we come back, I'm going to email you. You're not going to get away with this so easily. I know many people at Internet, so be careful about it. We are going to establish something. Take care. Thank you.